breaking news, Vivek just dropped an atomic bombshell about Kamala Harris. And I genuinely do not believe that this bombshell is getting enough coverage. But I intend to max out my freedom of speech. I intend to max out my constitutional rights. And I'm committed to sharing the truth as I see it, as it relates to what's happening right now. And with all the games that the media is playing right now, and all of the demonetization and the restrictions and the blacklisting and the cancellation and the suppression of independent creators like me, I know we've got to get the word out there by any means necessary. And truthfully, I was completely terrified when I was watching the DNC yesterday. When I watched the DNC and I saw how incredibly slick, smooth, articulate, rehearsed, robotic, and on point on her messaging that Kamala is. Shockingly, she's just as good, or I should say, as bad or evil as Gavin Newsom. But last night, I became convinced. In fact, I now believe for certain she absolutely can get elected. And if you believe in truth, justice, the American way, and free market capitalism, you should be terrified, because communism and socialism is coming soon if they get what they want. And it was only a few weeks ago that I thought it was absolutely impossible, virtually impossible, after Trump arose from being shot at and surviving that attack, yelling, "Fight, fight, fight." I thought it was a layup that he would be elected. I thought it was inconceivable that he would not win this election. Now I'm convinced there's a very strong possibility that Kamala gets herself elected, because evidently in politics, whomever tells the biggest lie wins. But I'll give credit where credit's due, and game respects game. The Democratic Party is unified in their messaging, in their propaganda. They're 100% on point and unified. And the Republican Party can't seem to get it right. The propaganda machine that is the corporate media continues to be on point with the Democratic agenda. And we all know this, and that's why we go to places like YouTube or other sources like X and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and Kevin 24/7 and Patrick Bet David and Valuetainment. We want to know the truth. We want to have a real conversation about the future of our country. And so far, there is no future for our country when it comes to real policies. Instead, we're getting pipe dreams to pander to the lowest common denominator, to the illegals, to the undocumented, and to anybody who can be bought and sold. And because I'm old, I remember a time in politics where the Republicans and the Democratic Party could get along. They got into relationships. They got into rapport. They worked together to get shit done. And the first person that comes to mind who was the best expert at this, in my opinion, was Tip O'Neill. Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, would often create relationships and opportunities in order for people to talk, just like Henry Kissinger did, just like Ronald Reagan did, and just like Donald Trump is. He's not afraid to talk to people. He's not afraid to have the hard conversations that it seems like the other party refuses to have with anyone. Unless, of course, there's a teleprompter and rules around what can be asked. But if you violate those rules, well, then you get booted. Unlike the illegals who are raiding our country, they can probably stay here forever and live in their Kamala homes. And while I wish I was a political insider, I'm not. I'm just a guy making videos on YouTube. But I've studied economics and the markets for a really long time. I followed politics since I was a boy. It's not like I'm uninformed as to what happened in history. I know what's going on. And it's not because I'm smart. It's because I can read and have common sense. But common sense is certainly not common these days, and they, them, and those want you to believe whatever the propaganda narrative is that they're mainlining into your brain constantly. But one of the things that I've learned along the way in my damn near 50 years of life, I'm not going to take business advice from someone who hasn't achieved more than me in business. And I'm certainly not going to take parenting advice from someone who's never had children. But call me old-fashioned or a dinosaur, I tend to judge people's ethics, values, morals, and core principles based on how their children turn out as adults. So when Tim Walz basically ripped his son's arm off for noncompliance at the DNC last night, it told me a lot about that particular individual. And it's foreshadowing of what we likely have to look forward to. God forbid these folks get elected. Unfortunately, the powers that be didn't tell Timmy Boy that he probably shouldn't manhandle his son on camera. I suspect it's better than him sniffing his son's hair and getting weirder than he already is. And no, I don't think that Tim Walz is a pedophile. Nobody's saying that. I'm not even alleging that. But what I saw last night confirmed my worst fear. Kamala is spectacular when she's on point. And the cackling nonsense and the incoherent babbling that she's been known for seems to have disappeared. And I know there's a lot of debate about the polls right now as to who's actually in the lead, and it's very hard to determine which poll is actually telling the truth. But one person that I don't doubt in terms of credibility, who I think is actually authentic and credible, somebody who tells it like it is, does what he says he's going to do, means what he says, and gets shit done at the highest level, is Vivek. And because I just watched the powers that be manipulate the economic data so that they can get their candidate, or I should say, force the person who received 0 votes from anyone, won 0 elections ever, at least as it relates to being president of the United States, she never once told anybody as to how she became the candidate, because nobody voted for her. She's just, poof, magically there. And just like Lucky Charms, she's magically delicious to the eyes and ears of they, them, and those who want her to be in power. And unfortunately, it seems like Trump and the Republicans are playing checkers and the Democratic Party is playing chess. But Vivek dropped a bombshell and made a nuclear prediction that I think people need to pay attention to because we're being manipulated. And it's only going to get worse.
So you have a confidence factor on this? You think it's going to happen?
But this the point I was going to make, Benny, is I think it's reasonably likely.
Yeah.
But the point I was going to make is whatever they pull on the other side, I think that our biggest trap now with this short of a time left till the election is that we get consumed by those shenanigans, so much so that we actually forget to just remind the voters of who we are and what we stand for.
Yeah.
And if we do that, irrespective of what trick they pull, Kamala for Biden, who knows whether it's going to be President Kamala or not, who knows? Right? The same people who told you that it was not going to be nominee Biden or nominee Kamala, that Biden wasn't going to be swapped out, now are going to tell you with the same confidence they did 6 months ago that he's going to serve out his term. My point is none of that matters. It doesn't have to matter if we don't make it matter. It doesn't have to matter if we actually focus on just communicating to the people of this country. What do we actually stand for in the first year? Seal the border, end the rampant crime. In Chicago, it's like, 14 murders a day. It's like 3 rapes per hour. It's insane statistics in this city. It's like every 18 seconds, you've got a car related theft. I mean, it's like the numbers are off the charts here.
Rapes, murder, and cars being broken into. Sounds like the America I want to live in.
The delegate was robbed at gunpoint.
I mean, it's just
like down the block.
It's a statistical reality, right?
Yeah.
And if our message is we're going to seal the border, end violent crime,
they gave the robbers free vasectomies.
Restore the rule of law. Yeah. Oh, the free vasectomy thing is interesting too, right? Because it actually almost proves the point that it's not about women's rights alone. It's actually about the agenda of ceasing family formation and having children.
It's kind of interesting that Vivek just mentioned reproduction. And obviously, women's rights are very important. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting otherwise. But I think we only need to look to China, look to some other countries to see exactly what happens when families don't grow, when the population doesn't increase. What exactly is the message that they're trying to send directly in our faces with a vasectomy and abortion clinic on wheels right in front of the DNC? What message do you think they're trying to send the youth? What message do they think they're trying to send to America? Well, they don't think they're sending a message. They're definitively in front of our face, in plain sight, telling us what the future holds. A massive decrease within the population of legal citizens and an exponential uptick in illegal alien who I suspect are chomping at the bit to live the American dream in their new Kamala home. But I digress.
Right. And so that almost becomes part of the agenda itself. And anyway, the point I was going to make is our risk right now. And the reason I'm not dwelling in the, in the prediction, I have my senses of things that could happen, but I think it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant as long as we actually focus on our own affirmative vision that is independent of whichever puppet they put up.
Is this your biggest prediction that they're going to do the hot swap for Biden while he's in office to Kamala Harris? Or
I think it's one of those who's getting swapped out.
Do you think there's something
now matters less?
Do you think there's something else?
You mean yet
to come?
I think that's the biggest one that's going to be in their control.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So a lot of these things, I think that it's like you're just imagine you're a trader in the markets, right? You want volatility when you're out of the money. So I would say the poorer the polls go in Kamala's direction, the more likely they are to bet for volatility. The better the polls look, the more modulated their strategies are going to be. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's exactly what happened when they swapped out Biden. When you're out of the money, you have all the incentive in the world to play for volatility because it's not going to get worse than bad, because a lot worse than bad is still a loss. Versus if you have volatility in the other direction, you can actually eke yourself out a win. So that's what they did with the swap out of Biden with Kamala. So I think it's a function of how the polls are actually looking. If the polls start sinking for Kamala and the honeymoon phases out, I think you're going to see some wild strategies deployed. I think if it looks like, roughly like it does right now, I think they're going to be temperate in their strategy. And the furthest they might consider going is the idea of potentially, and they have the perfect logic to do it, to say that, okay, well, the health reasons that stopped him from serving, as the presidential candidate, we've made a thoughtful decision on what's best for the American people, and they'd even get to take credit for it. And it would kind of make sense if they did. So I think that it's going to be a direct function of what their incentives are. And most people, most parties, most organizations act according to their incentives. Expect nothing different of the Democratic Party.
Just so we're on the same page here, what Vivek is predicting is that massive volatility is coming soon, and I couldn't agree more. And if the polls, when the honeymoon phase, when people wake up to the reality that they forgot, which is that Kamala is not able to talk and completely incompetent, and as the active vice president of the United States literally did nothing, zero, zilch, nada, in her entire term, when people remember that, the they, them, and those are very likely to whip out Pelosi's fentanyl titty again and put him out of his misery and put her into the presidency, which would effectively mean someone that was not voted for in our free republic is now the president of the United States of America. But Chris, there's not that many months until November and the election. So it's not that big of a deal, right? Well, I don't know. Ask Taiwan when they get invaded by China. And God forbid Kamala starts a hot war with Iran because the powers that be, the Black Hand, the government mafia, the industrial war machine, the global elites want her to. Because I don't believe anything they say. The only thing that they want is power and more money. More for them, less for us, until they rule the world. I don't exactly think it's a coincidence that Vladimir Putin has Russian nuclear subs armed with nuclear missiles doing training exercises, war games off the coast of Florida. But I'm afraid this is really just practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking. What they seem to forget is that we are built different. And I certainly hope, as Americans, we start acting like it. United we stand, divided we fall.
We just had a very nice endorsement from RFK Jr., Bobby. And I'll be talking about that. We're heading out right after this. We're going to be going to Arizona. We'll be talking about that. And a lot of other things too. But I just want to thank everybody, and I want to thank Bobby. That was very nice. That was really very nice. That's big. He's a great guy, respected by everybody.